Apple TV drops a bombshell that shows just how bad the reporting was for some of the realignment at this time last year. What does that mean, and what does it mean going forward?
You are Locked On Wildcats, your daily podcast on the Arizona Wildcats. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I'm your host, Mike Luke. Thanks for keeping it locked on Wildcats and making this your first listen of the day. This show is brought to you by FanDuel. Check it out, FanDuel.com. All kinds of really good stuff going on at FanDuel. You know your money's good, and it makes betting interesting. Check it out, FanDuel. All right, now, the Apple, at this time last year, we were hearing a lot of reports about how the Pac-12 was closing in on a deal with Apple Television, and basically don't worry about anything because, you know, the streaming is going to be fantastic. There's going to be all kinds of deals, and streaming is the wave of the future. What are we going to make on the back end, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But a big part to be just total nonsense. And Apple TV has now announced that they are going to be cutting back significantly on their streaming. This should not have come as a surprise to many people because, again, Apple is in it to make money. This has not been something that they have done a great job at to this point. And when it came to the Pac-12 media deal, you were really taking a leap of faith at that point to be able to say, okay, you know what? No other conference in the nation is doing this. But guess what we should do? We should hop in and we should make a deal with Apple TV for about $6 or $7 million less per, and with the basically having no idea how into this Apple actually is. And you're finding out now that this would have been a disastrous idea because there would have been, Apple is obviously not doing well in this regard. And you also know that Arizona would probably end up getting screwed, as would a lot of other teams in this. And we've seen this before. Remember, you know, with the Pac-12 network, it was always, well, you know what, let's just, you know, work out some of the tougher factors of it, and you'll get your money on the back end. Well, that money never came. The money on the back end never seems to actually come. And that is something where it's just, I think it's somewhat annoying. But the reporting at this time last year was essentially just 100% false. There's no other way to put it. You kept hearing people like John Canzano saying that there was a Pac-12 media deal right around the corner and that he was talking with all the people that would know and that he would know and that everybody else is unsourced. Well, you know what? We were talking with some people that would absolutely have a better idea than him about certain schools, and they were saying that he was full of it, and he was full of it. And you look at the Apple deal, that would have been a disaster, in that you would have made, what, 7 million less, almost 8 million less per school. You would have had nowhere near the reach, and you would have been tethered together then to a commissioner that has absolutely no idea what he was doing in George Kliavkoff. So there wasn't a lot of really good avenues to traverse when it came to the Apple TV deal, and Arizona made the right decision getting out of there. But it also goes to show you, too, that in this day and age, you got to be very careful with who you rely on in the media, because a lot of people are just looking to be able to satisfy their base or to be able to tell people what they want to hear. With Canzano, it was Washington State and it was Oregon State. I want to tell you what you want to hear, and it doesn't matter that George Kliavkoff is basically just making stuff up. I'm going to continue to report that, and anybody that doesn't report it is unsourced, was his term that he liked using a ton. Now, what does this mean then for the ACC? Now, anybody that is telling you that right now, well, you know, the ACC, they're standing firm, they're standing in solidarity, that's great. We heard all of this at this time last year. You stand firm and you stand in solidarity until you don't stand firm and you don't stand in solidarity. And then at some point, then the dam breaks and then everybody goes. And again, like we talked about a couple shows ago, there was absolutely no time when anybody of substance was reporting that Clemson and Florida State were going to be in the Big 12. For the 25-26 year. It was always the 26-27 year. That was always going to be the case. And honestly, it would have been impossible for it otherwise. So, you know, when Pete Thamel puts out that They're all standing strong on this year. Well, duh, dude. Nobody was saying that they were going to be in there next year, or it's going to be the year after. That is the target date. So what do you need to know about that? And then we're going to get to some Big 12, obviously, in Arizona. But what you need to know about it is how is this lawsuit going to play out for all the concerned parties? Is this going to be something where everybody is able to kind of find something where they find a happy medium? I don't think that's going to be the case. I think you've got way too many competing entities that do not have the same goals in mind. Again, and I think you got some people that are overvaluing their brand as well. I mean, you look at Florida State, and we'll get to Miami here in a second, but Florida State obviously is not known, and this isn't me saying, this is just because I'd love for them to join the Big 12. But Florida State is not known as an easy partner to work with, and having a little bit of an inflated ego on what their brand brings. But if you're Florida State, you're also saying, listen, man, we're one of the top 10 most iconic football brands of all time. We've won a national championship in the last 10 years. We've been, we were an injured quarterback away from being in the Final Four this past year. You've got a lot to stand on if you're Florida State. Plus, you're also in a region where obviously you've got a lot of talent. But if you're Florida, for example, I don't know that you're really looking to add a school like Florida State, give them a lifeline, and I don't think Florida State's going to get that lifeline, honestly. Then you deal with Miami. Miami's a little bit in the same boat, but to a lesser extent. Now, listen, everybody knows about the U growing up and just kind of, the iconic brand that it is, kind of that, that outlaw type image, and it's cool. But it also is a place where you don't have a ton of fan support. The facilities aren't great, but you can still win. You can still recruit at a top 15 level. Schools like that, if you're in the Big 12, you take them every single day of the week. Now, with Miami, they're AAU accredited, but I can also say for a fact that it does not seem like they would be a natural fit in the ACC. As a matter of fact, I would be stunned if they were a natural fit in the ACC. For a variety of different reasons. And if you're the SEC, I don't know that Miami really enhances your brand a ton. And I don't know that that Florida, which is one of your charter members, is really going to be all that interested in bringing them on board as well. So, so there's two schools right there. And I think you guys got to keep in mind that when people are talking about, the deal, everybody's, in lockstep, everybody's feeling great about everything. It's fun to say that, but at some point then you're in lockstep until you are not in lockstep anymore. And I think that's kind of where we are at with the ACC. Now, and people what would be advantageous about the Big 12? Well, first of all, it's a major conference. Second of all, we talked about it before, private equity is most likely going to play a massive role in all of this. Brett Yormark clearly knows what he's doing, and I think that he is going to look to try to get the best deal for people to be able to join the conference without really stiffing anybody that is already in the conference. But this is going to be something that's going to be fluid. It's going to be interesting to see how this plays out over time. But it's going to play out, and I think that at the end of the day, I think that this is going to be something where you're going to have a very strong, invigorated Big 12. And I think it's going to you're going to look at it and say, man, all these schools that got in there that were at the forefront of looking to get in there, they knew what they were doing, and I think a lot of that is because of Apple, the false reporting that was involved in all of that, so you got to be able to keep that one in mind. Now, coming up, we're going to talk about the Big 12 and what exactly, why this was the right move and what this means going forward for Arizona. But first, eBay Motors, my friends, eBay Motors. Check it out. Again, at eBay Motors, all kinds of really good stuff. Here, are you tired of taking your car to somebody that you don't know and you're like, man, I feel like I'm being overcharged by 8,000%? Guess what? You probably are being outcharged by over 8,000%. Here's what eBay Motors does. They say, come to us. We will get you the part at a good deal, at a good rate for you, and then you can take it to somebody you trust. Save the money in the meantime. Go to ebaymotors.com. Again, this is another one of these ones where you will thank me later on it. eBay Motors is where it's at. All kinds of really good stuff with eBay Motors. Cut out the middleman. Millions of parts for your MVP. Win every time with parts that fit your ride. Thanks for keeping it locked on Wildcats and making this your first listen of the day. I am your host, Mike Luke. All right, now, let's talk a little bit about the Big 12. This goes to show you again that this was just the right move for Arizona and just the genius of Brett Yormark having Arizona in a position where he said, all right, I'm going to let everything play out for you, but if this doesn't work out for you, we're going to have a nice little soft landing spot for you, and that's exactly what he did. He did that with Arizona. Now, Arizona was obviously at the forefront of looking to leave. They had applied for admission the night before even Oregon and Washington left, but Colorado obviously was at the forefront of that as well. Then You've got Utah and you've got ASU. Neither one of them wanted to go, but they were given that lifeline. And that is instructive for going forward. Just because you don't want to go doesn't mean that you're not going to take the lifeline. If I don't want to be saved by somebody, but they're the only person that's going to save me, guess what? I am going to take that lifeline. That is something that I think you got to keep in mind on. Now, when it comes to the Big 12, that's going to be their next move again. But Yormark has a very stable entity in place. And for Arizona, that's all you really want. You wanted a stable entity in place that that if things get rough, we know that this conference is, you got a guy that knows what he's doing, you got a guy that's running the ship, and he knows what he's doing. That is something that I think a lot of people take for granted when it comes to conference leadership. And we've seen this before with the Pac-12, is that, you don't really know what's going on. And with expansion, with TV deals, you're going to get the best deal going there. And Arizona was very smart to hop in on this, because if you're going to tether yourself to somebody, you're going to want to tether yourself to Brett Yormark. The guy just knows what he's doing, and it just shows time and time again. Obviously, the right move for the University of Arizona, and even though they didn't want to do it at the time, obviously the right move for ASU and Utah as well. Now, what is the possible next move for Arizona? Well, obviously we talked about it yesterday. You're in the Big 12 at this point, and everybody knows that there's going to be another round of conference blow-ups at some point. That's just a foregone conclusion. Everybody knows that is going to happen. I think the big thing, though, and we've talked about this a ton, and we're going to keep talking about it, though, because it's a good point, is that you want to be in the best position possible if there is another blow-up, that you are the most enviable, that you are in the best spot. And Arizona, I think, Arizona going into the Big 12, I think fits both those bills. First, with football, Arizona obviously is playing good football now. There's a lot of expectations, and I think the thought is that if you win the Big 12, or if you win the Big 12, I think you're hoping that if you're Brent Brennan, that you can parlay that into more stuff, that you can parlay that into an even better season and increase your brand. Increasing your brand is a big part of all of this. Being able to be something that nationally resonates, and I think with football there is every opportunity for it, especially if you add a Florida State into Clemson or Miami, whatever. These are big time brands, obviously, but you can also, I think it's also a high tide raises all ships in my opinion here, and I think it forces Arizona to get better. And as good as these schools are, and they're obviously awesome, a school like Clemson, for example, yes, they were on top of college football for a long time, but the last 3 years or so in the NIL era, they kind of dropped off a little bit. You look at your ranks, 13, 14, then 20. That's obviously Arizona could have beaten Clemson last year. They probably would have beaten Clemson last year. Then, you talk about Miami. Miami, I think, obviously is, really good, but I also don't know that any team that is coached by Mario Cristobal is going to scare anybody. But again, that's the point, though, is that you're going to be able to compete with these schools. You might not win, you might not get the absolute most out of it, but it's going to be able to compete. And when it comes to your Kansas States, your Utahs, your Oklahoma States, obviously very, very solid programs all the way around, you're still going to have to be able to show that you can. You're still going to obviously have to show that you can compete, and I think there's no reason why that you can't beat those teams. Now, again, those are really solid teams. And yes, they're really solid teams, but there's not a ton of inherent advantages for Kansas State or for Kansas or for Oklahoma State over Arizona. So that's where I don't really subscribe to the theory that, oh well, with Arizona these are like let's use Mike Gundy for example. Mike Gundy's done an amazing job at Oklahoma State, but I don't look at Oklahoma State and say that's not something that Arizona can't be. Now listen, I'm not going to sit here and say that Georgia's something that Arizona can't be because I don't think that's probably realistic. But these other programs that are solid top 25 entities, I just don't see why Arizona can't be in that mix. As a matter of fact, I think that they will be in that mix. That's why I think being the Big 12 is also very good from a competitive factor because it's a good conference and it's a fun conference, but there's also a template there with a lot of different schools that recruit and develop that are able to kind of take their game to the next level, and I think that that's very much something that is in play in the Big 12 for Arizona, and I think it's something that's just exciting when it comes to talk about football, and let's be honest here too. It feels like a natural fit. You look at a lot of these schools, the schools that you're going to be visiting, and the fan bases are awesome. They care about sports. They're welcoming, all kinds of really good stuff. So I think there's every opportunity for Arizona to be able to continue to increase its brand while it's in the Big 12. And honestly, I think Brett Yormark is going to realize that as well. And big thing with Arizona is you just got to continue to, you got to continue to win. And if you continue to win, I think a lot of times things just kind of take care of itself. If you win, generally there's going to be more eyeballs involved. There's going to be more people that are going to be interested in your product. And I think that's just kind of where Arizona's got to be at this point. If Arizona can be there at this point, then I think you feel pretty good about things. But Big 12 is definitely a spot where Arizona's going to get visibility. It's going to get notoriety if it wins, and you're able to get multiple teams into the college football playoffs. That is, that's where it's at. And then it's on you to be able to win at that point. Now, listen, you're probably not going to get 4 teams in or whatever, like the Big Ten or the SEC, but you get multiple teams in. It's on you to be able to step up there. And I do think too, if a Florida State or a Clemson you probably are going to get more bids as well. But it's on Arizona to be able to continue to increase their game and be able to do that. Now we're going to talk about basketball here in a second, but first, FanDuel. Check it out. FanDuel. All kinds of really good stuff at FanDuel. Great thing about FanDuel is this. You know that your money is good with FanDuel. Go to FanDuel.com and you can bet on futures, you can bet in-game, you can bet props, all kinds of good stuff. And like I said, with FanDuel, you know that your money is good. And I think that is just the thing that I keep coming back to is you get a lot of people in this day and age that are like, well, I'm kind of worried about, will I be able to get this paid out at the right time? Or will I be able to, this or that, or whatever the case may be. FanDuel's been around. It has been supported. Everybody knows that FanDuel is a very, very good spot. And check it out again, FanDuel.com. Another one of these ones, you will thank me later. Thanks for keeping it locked on Wildcats and making this your first listen of the day. I am your host, Mike Luke. All right, now let's talk a little bit about Arizona basketball. This is going to be one where, we said yesterday, I think Arizona basketball is going to be better probably than Arizona football. But at the same time, you also know that you're going to be in a conference where there are a lot of really, really good players. And I think that's kind of what's exciting about all of this. Now, with Arizona basketball, another one. This is another one. It's a national brand, but I also think that you've just got to be able to win. If you win and you do stuff, you're obviously relevant. Arizona's got a great fan base. It had the best fan base in the Pac-12 by a mile. And it's going into a conference where you are going to get some primetime, big-time matchups against Kansas, against Houston, so I also think, too, that at the end of the day, this is going to help Arizona come March Madness because you're going to find that, there's going to be times when you have to really be able to just kind of, get loaded for bear, for lack of a better term, and Arizona, I think, is in that spot. With Tommy Lloyd, he is a Tommy Lloyd is a Tommy Lloyd's a good dude. Tommy Lloyd is a really, really good dude. I think sometimes, though, probably discipline or holding players accountable isn't probably something that he's the best at. And I don't think that you can get away with that in the Big 12 like you could in the Pac 12. In the Pac 12, it was essentially fool's gold. That you had a lot of different teams that you could play Kylan Boswell even if he was hungover, or you could play because again they're probably not going to beat you. In the Big 12, if you're playing players that don't deserve to be out there, you are going to get dealt with, and you're going to get dealt with very early. So I think accountability is going to be something that will probably be brought to the forefront for Tommy Lloyd. And I think, honestly, that's a really, really good thing for Tommy Lloyd, is because, again, he's just a good dude. I don't think that he really looks for confrontation. I think quite frankly, I think he kind of doesn't like it. So, but in the Big 12, it's very much a swim or, swim or don't swim, whatever the term is. But you get the point. But Arizona, though, is a top 10 entity going into the Big 12, and I think that I think that there's a potential for it to get even bigger, because you're not going to be buried on Pac-12 Network. You're not going to be playing those late games that nobody cares about at Washington State or whatever the case may be. You're going to be playing games that really matter, and that'll continue to improve your brand. I think a big part of all of this, though, is that this brand is going to be improved greatly by going to the Big 12. And going to the Big 12 is something that I know a lot of people were kind of kicking and screaming about, but it was the right move, and it goes to show, too, by the way that Apple deal fell apart. The way that Apple deal fell apart, and Apple's latest news shows that sometimes you don't want to listen to people that just have a very vested interest in just making stuff up. That a lot of times is not the way to go about doing things. But that's a big part of this, though. Moving forward, Arizona's got to continue to increase its brand. And Arizona's got to continue to increase its brand by winning games, period. And by winning games, period, that means that you got to win games and you got to be relevant. And there's no reason why at this stage in the game that Arizona can't be relevant. If Arizona's relevant, then Arizona is going to have a very nice seat at the negotiation table. Okay, now, coming up next week, we are going to start talking now more about where exactly everything falls with the Pac-12, or excuse me, the Pac-12, with the Big 12. We're going to talk about rankings. We're going to talk about units that Arizona needs to that people might need to know a little bit more about. There's a lot of different things, but we're getting really close, ladies and gentlemen. We're getting really, really close to the start of football season. I believe it's 38 days away now, if I'm not mistaken. Not that we're counting down the days or anything. So we're going to be breaking down quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, offensive line, you name it. That's going to be part of it here on Locked On Wildcats. But again, wanted to talk a little bit about that Apple deal, because that was obviously a bunch of phooey, and it came out, and obviously Apple would have not been a really good deal. So, but Arizona's in a good spot right now, and it's all just about winning games, improving its brand, and continuing to move forward. And I have every faith in the world that Arizona's going to be able to do that, because I think you got two good coaches, and I think you've got a really good realm of talent as well. But again, we got a lot coming up here in the coming weeks that we're going to talk about, all that and a ton more. But as always, very, very much appreciate you all making Locked On Wildcats your first listen of the day. I'm your host, Mike Luke. Bear down, back the A, and we will be back with you.